I stood there holding the rusty key in my trembling hand, staring at the padlocked barn door that had been forbidden to me for 37 years of marriage. "You can never go in there," Robert had said every single time I asked, his voice carrying a finality that made me stop questioning. But now Robert was dead, and the key was mine. Can you imagine living your entire married life with a locked door on your own property, never knowing what secrets lay behind it? What would you do if the person you trusted most had hidden an entire world from you? I turned that key with shaking fingers, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in the silence of that October afternoon. But I already knew that what I was about to discover would forever change everything I thought I knew about the man I had loved for 4 decades. But before I continue, take a quick look to make sure you're still subscribed. I don't want you to miss any of these eye-opening stories. My name is Patricia Williams, I'm 64 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I was simply a farmer's wife in rural Montana. For 37 years, I worked alongside Robert on our modest wheat farm, believing we shared everything. Every sunrise, every harvest, every struggle to make ends meet. I raised our 2 children, Sarah and Michael, while Robert worked the fields from dawn to dusk. We lived simply, saved carefully, and I thought I knew every inch of our 300-acre property, except for that barn. That forbidden, locked barn that Robert claimed was just storage for broken equipment. The funeral had been simple, just like Robert would have wanted. Our children had flown in from their busy city lives, Sarah from Seattle with her lawyer husband, Michael from Denver with his real estate business. They stayed just long enough to see their father buried, to awkwardly pat my shoulder, and to ask if I needed help sorting through Dad's things. But they didn't know about the envelope the lawyer had handed me after the will reading, the one marked, "For Patricia only, open when alone." Inside was a single brass key and a note in Robert's careful handwriting. "Patty, you deserve to know the truth. The barn first, then the metal box buried under the old oak. Trust no one until you understand everything. I'm sorry." That afternoon, I walked across the yard I had crossed thousands of times, past the vegetable garden I tended every summer, past the chicken coop where our last few hens pecked at the ground. The barn loomed ahead of me, weathered red paint peeling from its sides, that heavy padlock hanging like a silent guardian. I had asked about that lock so many times over the years. "Just keeping the kids safe from old machinery," Robert would say. "Nothing interesting in there, just junk." But his eyes never met mine when he said it. The key slid into the padlock with an ease that suggested it had been used recently. As the metal clicked open, I felt a strange chill run down my spine. The door was heavier than I expected, its hinges protesting with a groan that seemed to echo across the empty fields. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Not the musty odor of abandonment I had expected, but something clean, almost medicinal. Sunlight streamed through small windows I had never noticed from the outside, illuminating a space that took my breath away. This wasn't storage for broken equipment. This was a workshop, a beautiful, organized workshop filled with hand-carved furniture, intricate wooden toys, and dozens of paintings hanging on the walls. Paintings of landscapes I recognized, of our farm in different seasons, of me working in the garden, of our children as babies. But there was something else, something that made my hands start to shake. In the corner stood an easel with a half-finished portrait, and next to it, a small table covered with pill bottles. Prescription bottles with Robert's name on them, dates going back 2 years, cancer medication, chemotherapy drugs, medications I had never seen before, never knew he was taking. What I was about to discover in that forbidden barn would make Robert's death just the beginning of a revelation that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my family, and the fortune that had been hidden right under my feet. I stood frozen in that barn for what felt like hours, staring at those pill bottles with Robert's name printed in stark black letters. OxyContin for pain, ondansetron for nausea, dexamethasone, a steroid I recognized from when my sister went through her own cancer battle. The dates on the labels told a story I couldn't comprehend. Prescriptions filled monthly for the past 2 years, picked up from a pharmacy 40 miles away in Billings, a town Robert claimed he never visited. My legs felt weak, so I sank into a handmade wooden chair that was so perfectly crafted it could have been in a furniture showroom. Everything in this barn spoke of hours, months, maybe years of secret work. The paintings weren't just hobby sketches, they were masterpieces. I recognized Robert's style in the careful brushstrokes, but this was a level of artistry I had never known he possessed. There was our farm painted in golden autumn light, so beautiful it made my chest ache. There was our old dog Rusty, captured so perfectly I could almost hear his bark. And there, hanging in a place of honor above the easel, was a painting of me on our wedding day, young and radiant in my simple white dress, more beautiful than any photograph could ever be. But it was the folder lying open on the workbench that made my blood run cold. Medical reports, oncology appointments, treatment schedules, all dated, all signed, all bearing Robert's name. Stage 3, pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 26 months ago. The prognosis was written in cold medical terminology that I had to read 3 times before understanding. 18 months to live with aggressive treatment, 6 months without. Robert had lived for 26 months after that diagnosis, fighting a battle I never knew existed. I picked up one of the reports with trembling hands. The doctor's notes were detailed, clinical, devastating. Patient continues to refuse to inform family of diagnosis, insists on maintaining normal routine at home, discussed end-of-life planning. Patient adamant about completing personal project before disclosure. Personal project. I looked around the barn with new eyes, understanding flooding through me like ice water. This hadn't been Robert's escape from me. This had been his love letter to me. Beneath the medical files, I found something that made my heart stop completely. Bank statements. Not from our usual account at First National, but from an investment firm I'd never heard of. The numbers didn't make sense at first. Too many zeros, amounts that seemed impossible. Then I saw the header clearly. Robert Williams Investment Portfolio. Current value, $2.7 million. $2.7 million. We lived paycheck to paycheck. We worried about property taxes every year. I bought generic groceries and mended clothes until they fell apart. And Robert had been quietly accumulating a fortune that could have changed everything. My hands shook as I flipped through page after page of investment records. Oil stocks purchased 20 years ago when prices were dirt cheap. Tech company shares bought in the early days of the internet boom. Real estate investments in properties I didn't even know we owned. All managed through a broker in Denver, the same city where our son Michael lived, though I was certain Michael knew nothing about this. But there was more. Tucked behind the investment statements was a manila envelope marked Land Survey, Confidential. Inside were geological reports, soil analysis documents, and maps of our property with areas marked in red ink. Technical language filled the pages, but certain phrases jumped out at me. Significant oil deposits confirmed. Estimated reserves, substantial commercial viability. Recommended immediate development rights negotiation. Oil. There was oil under our farm, under the fields where I had planted vegetables, where our children had played, where I had walked every morning for 37 years. The reports were dated 6 months ago, and handwritten notes in Robert's careful script filled the margins. Don't tell Patty yet. Wait until treatments are finished. She deserves to enjoy this without worry. I sank back into that beautiful chair, the weight of revelation crushing down on me. Robert hadn't just hidden his illness from me. He had hidden a transformation of our entire life. We weren't poor farmers scraping by. We were millionaires sitting on an oil fortune, and I had been living a lie of poverty while my husband quietly prepared to make me rich. But something else was nagging at me, a detail that didn't fit. In the corner of the barn, partially hidden behind a canvas tarp, I could see the edge of something metal. I stood up on unsteady legs and pulled the tarp away, revealing a large metal filing cabinet with a combination lock. Next to it was a small wooden box with emergency only carved into its lid. Inside the box was another key, this one newer and shinier than the barn key, with a tag that read, Safety Deposit Box 247, First National Bank. A safety deposit box I didn't know existed. At our own bank, where I had done business for decades, where the tellers knew me by name and asked about my vegetable garden every summer. How many more secrets had Robert kept? How many more lies had I been living? I tried the combination lock on the filing cabinet, starting with obvious dates. Our anniversary, the children's birthdays, Robert's birthday. Nothing worked, but then I remembered something strange from the week before Robert died. He had been mumbling numbers in his sleep, the same sequence over and over, 11, 27, 52. I had assumed it was medication making him delirious, but now I wondered if it had been something else entirely. The lock clicked open on the first try. Inside the filing cabinet were dozens of folders, each meticulously labeled and organized. Property deeds, investment records, original documentation, insurance policies, oil rights agreements, and at the very back, a folder that made my blood freeze. Family protection. Urgent. I opened that folder with hands that I couldn't keep steady, and what I found inside changed everything I thought I understood about Robert's death, about timing, and about why he had kept these secrets until the very end. Legal documents, correspondence with lawyers, and a series of letters addressed to me, each one dated for a specific time after his death. The first letter was marked "Open immediately after reading barn contents." The second was dated for 1 week later. The third, marked in red ink, was labeled "Open only if Sarah and Michael contest the will." The first letter was in Robert's handwriting, his familiar careful script that I had seen on grocery lists and birthday cards for nearly 4 decades. But the words he had written made me realize that I was about to face a battle I never saw coming, and that my husband's death was just the beginning of a fight for everything he had built in secret. "My dearest Patty," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then you know about my illness, and you know about our fortune. But what you don't know yet is that we are not the only ones who know about the oil. Sarah and Michael have been in contact with Baxter Industries for 6 months, trying to get me to sell the mineral rights. They think I don't know about their meetings, about their plans to have me declared incompetent, about their arrangement to split the profits 50-50 once they get control of the farm. They're coming for everything, Patty, and they're coming soon." I read Robert's letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. Sarah and Michael, my own children, the babies I had nursed through fevers and nightmares, the teenagers I had driven to soccer practice and piano lessons, had been plotting behind their dying father's back to steal his fortune. Our fortune. The fortune I hadn't even known existed until 20 minutes ago. The letter continued in Robert's steady handwriting. Baxter Industries approached them after the geological survey became public record. Somehow they found out about Sarah's law connections and Michael's real estate experience. The company offered them $200,000 each just to convince me to sell the mineral rights for a fraction of what they're worth. They think the farm is worth maybe $50,000. They have no idea we're sitting on millions. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. I thought about the phone calls over the past few months, the ones where Sarah and Michael would talk quietly in the kitchen after dinner, stopping abruptly when I walked in. I thought about Michael's sudden interest in visiting more often, his questions about Dad's plans for the property. I thought about Sarah's casual suggestions that maybe Dad was getting confused about finances, that maybe it was time to help him make better decisions. They hadn't been concerned children. They had been circling vultures. The letter went on. "I've been playing dumb, letting them think their plan is working, but I've been documenting everything, Patty. Every phone call, every meeting, every lie they've told us both. It's all in the filing cabinet, in the folder marked evidence. You'll need it when they make their move, and they will make their move fast, probably within days of my funeral." I fumbled through the filing cabinet until I found the evidence folder, and what I discovered inside made me sick to my stomach. Photographs taken with a telephoto lens of Sarah and Michael meeting with men in expensive suits at a restaurant in Billings. Audio recordings, apparently Robert had been more tech-savvy than I ever realized, of phone conversations between our children discussing the old man's stubbornness and speeding up the timeline. Email printouts between Sarah and someone named Jay Baxter discussing psychological pressure tactics and competency evaluation procedures. One email from Sarah to her brother made me want to vomit. "Mike, we need to move faster. Dad's getting weaker, which is good, but Mom's going to be a problem. She'll want to keep the farm for sentimental reasons. We might need to have her evaluated too. Grief can cause mental instability in elderly people. Jay." Baxter says his legal team can handle both of them if necessary. Both of them. They were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent too. I sank into Robert's chair, the weight of betrayal crushing me like a physical force. These weren't my children anymore. These were strangers wearing the faces of the people I had loved most in the world, planning to destroy me for money they thought I was too stupid to understand. But there was more. Robert's investigation had uncovered details that painted an even darker picture. Baxter Industries wasn't just interested in our oil. They were systematically targeting elderly landowners throughout Montana, using children and relatives to pressure families into selling valuable mineral rights for pennies on the dollar. Sarah and Michael weren't just betraying us. They were part of a larger conspiracy that had been ruining families across the state. The evidence folder contained a list of 17 other families who had lost their land the same way. Elderly parents suddenly declared incompetent. Adult children granted power of attorney. Mineral rights sold within weeks of the competency hearings. And in every case, Baxter Industries swooped in with contracts that made the families rich on paper, but left them with a fraction of what their land was actually worth. As I tried to connect the dots, I got curious. Where are you listening to me from right now? Drop your city in the comments. I like to imagine these stories echoing in so many different places. Robert had been building a case against Baxter Industries for months. He had contacted other victims, gathered evidence of fraud, even hired a private investigator to document the company's pattern of elder abuse. The folder contained business cards for lawyers who specialized in family fraud, contact information for adult protective services, and a detailed timeline of how these land grab schemes typically unfolded. But the most chilling discovery was a folder labeled Timeline Our Case. Robert had mapped out exactly how Sarah and Michael's plan would work. First, they would have him declared incompetent, claiming his cancer treatments were affecting his judgment. Then they would petition for joint power of attorney, with Sarah handling legal matters and Michael managing property decisions. Once they had control, they would sell the mineral rights to Baxter Industries, pocket their commission, and put me in a nursing home for my own safety. The timeline showed that Robert expected them to make their move within a week of his death. His funeral had been 4 days ago, which meant I had maybe 3 days before my own children tried to destroy my life. I was still processing this information when I heard the sound of car tires on gravel. Through the barn window, I could see a black SUV pulling into our driveway, followed by a silver sedan I recognized as Sarah's rental car. My heart started pounding. They were here, now, exactly as Robert had predicted. I quickly gathered the most important documents: the investment records, the oil survey, the evidence against Baxter Industries, and stuffed them into a canvas bag I found hanging on a hook. Through the window, I watched Sarah and Michael get out of their cars along with 2 men in dark suits. One of the men was carrying a briefcase and what looked like legal documents. They weren't here to comfort their grieving mother. They were here to begin the takedown. I slipped out the back of the barn and circled around to the house, entering through the kitchen door just as they knocked on the front door. My heart was racing, but Robert's letter had prepared me for this moment. At the bottom of his first note, he had written, "Don't let them know you know. Play the confused, grieving widow. Let them think they're smarter than you. Make them confident enough to reveal their whole plan." When I opened the front door, Sarah immediately wrapped me in a hug that felt like a performance. "Oh, Mom, how are you holding up? We were so worried about you being out here all alone." Michael stepped forward with the 2 strangers. "Mom, these are some friends who want to help us figure out Dad's affairs. You know how confusing financial stuff can be, especially right now when you're grieving." The taller of the 2 men extended his hand with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Mrs. Williams, I'm James Baxter from Baxter Industries. I'm so sorry for your loss. Your children have asked me to help sort through some property matters that might be overwhelming for you right now. James Baxter." The man whose emails I had just read, the man who had called me an obstacle to be eliminated, was standing in my living room pretending to care about my well-being. "That's so thoughtful," I said, making my voice sound small and confused. "Robert always handled everything. I don't know anything about business or property or any of that complicated stuff." I saw Sarah and Michael exchange a quick glance, and Baxter's smile got wider. They thought I was going to be easy to manipulate. They had no idea that their dying father had given me the tools to destroy them all. But as I led them into the living room, chattering about how lost and confused I felt, I realized that Robert's investigation had revealed something even more terrifying than my children's greed. In the very last folder, marked Urgent Life Insurance, I had glimpsed something that made my blood run cold. A document suggesting that Robert's death might not have been as natural as everyone believed. And if my own children were capable of financial betrayal on this scale, I was beginning to wonder what else they might be capable of. I served coffee to my children and their co-conspirators in the same living room where I had rocked them to sleep as babies, my hands steady despite the rage burning in my chest. They had no idea that I knew everything. About the oil, about the money, about their plan to destroy me. I played the confused widow perfectly, asking innocent questions about complicated legal things while they exchanged confident glances. "Mom," Sarah said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she used with difficult clients, "we need to talk about some practical matters. Dad left behind some financial complications that might be hard for you to handle alone." Michael nodded seriously. "We're worried about you, Mom. This farm is a lot of responsibility, and with Dad gone, maybe it's time to consider simplifying your life." James Baxter leaned forward with his predatory smile. "Mrs. Williams, your children have told me about some potential value in your property that you might not be aware of. Sometimes when people pass away, they leave behind assets that can be overwhelming for surviving spouses to manage." I blinked at them with wide, innocent eyes. "Assets? You mean like the tractor? Robert always said it wasn't worth much." Sarah actually laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Mom, it's much more complicated than farm equipment. There might be mineral rights issues, geological concerns, the kind of thing that requires professional management." "We've found some paperwork in Dad's office," Michael lied smoothly. "Stuff about the land that's way too complex for anyone without legal training to understand." We think Dad might have been getting confused about it himself toward the end. The second man, who had been introduced as Baxter's legal associate, opened his briefcase. "Mrs. Williams, we'd like to help your family navigate these complications. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let professionals handle the technical aspects while you focus on healing." I watched them set up their lies like dominoes, each one building on the last, preparing to knock down my entire life. But what made my heart break wasn't their greed. It was the casual way they talked about Robert's supposed confusion, the disrespect they showed for the man who had worked himself to death to provide for them. "What kind of complications?" I asked, keeping my voice small and worried. Baxter pulled out a thick folder. "Well, there appear to be some geological surveys that were done without your knowledge. Your husband may have been approached by companies interested in resource extraction." "Oil companies, specifically." Sarah jumped in quickly. "The thing is, Mom, these oil companies can be really predatory with widows. They'll try to trick you into signing contracts that aren't in your best interest. We think it's better if Mike and I handle any negotiations. We have the legal background to protect you." "Protect me from what?" I asked. Michael's mask slipped for just a moment, irritation flashing across his face. "From making bad decisions, Mom. From being taken advantage of. Dad might have signed some preliminary agreements that could be problematic if not handled correctly." That was when I realized they didn't actually know about Robert's secret wealth. They knew about the oil potential. That much was clear from their emails. But they had no idea that Robert had been quietly building a multi-million-dollar investment portfolio for decades. They thought they were stealing worthless farmland that happened to sit on valuable oil. They had no idea they were trying to rob me of a fortune that was already mine. "We've prepared some paperwork," Baxter said, sliding documents across my coffee table. "Just temporary arrangements to make sure everything is handled properly. Power of attorney forms, so Sarah and Michael can deal with the complicated stuff while you grieve. Property management agreements, so you don't have to worry about business decisions. Very standard stuff for situations like this." I picked up the papers with trembling hands, pretending to struggle with the legal language. But my years of helping Robert with farm paperwork had taught me enough to recognize what I was looking at. Total control. Complete authority over all financial decisions. The right to sell property without my consent. Everything Robert had warned me about, laid out in black and white. This seems like an awful lot, I said hesitantly. Mom, Sarah's voice got sharp. We're trying to help you. Do you want to deal with oil company executives and lawyers and geological surveys? Do you want to sit through meetings about mineral extraction and lease agreements? Your daughter's right, Baxter said smoothly. These matters can be very stressful for someone in your position. Much better to let family handle the technical aspects. But then Michael made a mistake that revealed everything. He pulled out his phone and showed me what he thought was a helpful diagram. Look, Mom, here's a simple breakdown of how mineral rights work. See, the land is worth maybe 40 or 50,000, but the oil underneath could be worth, well, a lot more. Maybe even a few 100,000 if we're lucky. A few 100,000. They were planning to steal millions and telling me it might be worth hundreds of thousands. Robert's investigation had been right. Baxter Industries specialized in convincing families to sell multi-million-dollar assets for a tiny fraction of their value. And my own children were helping them do it. That sounds like so much money, I said in a small voice. It is a lot of money, Mom, Sarah said, her tone becoming more aggressive. Too much for you to handle alone. What if you made a mistake? What if you signed the wrong contract? You could lose everything Dad worked for. The irony was suffocating. They were warning me about losing everything Dad worked for while actively trying to steal everything Dad had actually accomplished. I need some time to think about all this, I said, setting the papers down. Baxter's friendly mask slipped completely. Mrs. Williams, I'm afraid time is a luxury we don't have. Other companies are already sniffing around this area. If we don't act quickly, you might miss this opportunity entirely. Mom, Michael's voice got hard, you need to trust us. We're your children. We love you. We want what's best for you. Love. They were talking about love while planning to put me in a nursing home and steal my husband's life's work. That's when I made a decision that surprised even me. I stood up slowly, walked to the mantelpiece where Robert's ashes sat in their simple wooden urn, and picked up the framed photo next to it, our wedding picture from 40 years ago. You know, I said, my voice getting stronger, Robert always told me to be careful who I trusted. He said that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the worst. Sarah and Michael both started talking at once, reassuring me, patronizing me, trying to get me back to the table to sign their papers. But I was no longer listening to their words. I was watching their faces, seeing the calculation behind their concern, the impatience beneath their false kindness. I think you should all leave now, I said quietly. Mom, Sarah's voice got sharp. You're not thinking clearly. The grief is making you paranoid. Mrs. Williams, Baxter stood up, his friendly demeanor completely gone. I hope you understand that opportunities like this don't come around often. It would be unfortunate if you missed this chance because of emotional decision-making. The threat was barely veiled. Sign now, or face the consequences. I said, leave. They gathered their papers with obvious frustration, exchanging glances that told me everything I needed to know about what came next. As they reached the door, Sarah turned back with tears in her eyes, tears that might have fooled me yesterday, but today looked like nothing more than manipulation. Mom, we're just trying to take care of you. Dad would have wanted us to take care of you. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the silence of my empty house, and opened the folder Robert had labeled Life Insurance, Urgent. What I found inside made me realize that my children's betrayal was even darker than I had imagined, and that Robert's death might not have been the peaceful passing we had all believed it to be. Medical records showing that Robert's cancer had been in remission, a toxicology report that had never been filed with the coroner, and a note in Robert's handwriting dated just 3 days before he died. They're getting impatient. I think they're going to try something. If anything happens to me, Patty needs to know that my medication was switched. The pills in the kitchen aren't what the doctor prescribed. I stared at Robert's final note until the words blurred through my tears. My husband hadn't just died from cancer. He might have been murdered by our own children. The pills in the kitchen. I ran to the medicine cabinet above the sink, my hands shaking as I pulled out the prescription bottles that had been there during Robert's final weeks. The labels looked normal. Pain medication prescribed by Dr. Henderson, filled at Morrison's pharmacy in town. But when I examined them more closely, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Tiny pinpricks in the safety seals. Someone had opened these bottles and resealed them. Someone had been tampering with Robert's medication. I was still standing in the kitchen, holding the evidence of what might be my husband's murder, when I heard car engines in the driveway again. Through the window, I saw the black SUV returning, but this time it wasn't alone. 2 more vehicles had joined it, a white pickup truck and another sedan. 6 men in dark suits were getting out, and they were heading straight for my house. My heart hammered against my ribs as I quickly stuffed Robert's note and the tampered pill bottles into the canvas bag with the other evidence. These weren't just business associates making a follow-up call. This was intimidation, pure and simple. The knock on my door came harder this time, more insistent. When I opened it, James Baxter pushed past me without waiting for an invitation, followed by his associates. Sarah and Michael were nowhere to be seen. Apparently, they were letting the professionals handle the dirty work now. "Mrs. Williams," Baxter's voice had lost all pretense of friendliness, "we need to have a more serious conversation about your decision-making capacity." "I'm sorry?" One of the new men stepped forward. "Mrs. Williams, I'm Dr. Marcus Webb, a geriatric psychiatrist. Your children have expressed concerns about your mental state following your husband's death. They've asked me to conduct a preliminary evaluation." A geriatric psychiatrist. They were moving to have me declared incompetent, exactly as Robert had predicted. But they were doing it faster than his timeline had suggested, which meant something had spooked them. "I don't understand," I said, backing toward the kitchen. "I'm fine. I'm grieving, but I'm fine." "Ma'am," another man stepped forward, showing me a badge. "I'm Officer Craig from Adult Protective Services. We've received reports that you may be experiencing confusion and paranoid ideation following your recent loss. We're here to help." Help. The same word they had all used while planning to destroy me. Dr. Webb opened a tablet and began asking questions designed to make me sound confused and incompetent. "Mrs.
Williams, can you tell me what year it is? Who is the current president? Can you count backwards from 100 by sevens?" I answered correctly, but I could see him making notes that probably painted my responses in the worst possible light. Meanwhile, Baxter and his associates were walking through my house uninvited, examining papers on my desk, looking at family photographs, cataloging my belongings like vultures picking over a carcass. "Mrs. Williams," Dr. Sue. Webb continued, "Your children tell me you've been making unusual claims about family members, accusing them of plotting against you, expressing paranoid thoughts about business associates trying to harm you. These can be signs of grief-induced psychosis." Grief-induced psychosis. They had an answer for everything, a clinical explanation that would justify taking away my freedom and my fortune. "I never said anything like that," I protested. "Memory problems are also common in these situations," Dr. Webb made another note. "Mrs. Williams, I'm going to recommend a more comprehensive evaluation at our facility, just for a few days, to make sure you're safe." That's when I realized I was trapped. If I went along with their evaluation, I would disappear into their system, probably declared incompetent within days. If I resisted, they would claim it as proof of my mental instability. Robert had prepared me for this moment, but knowing it was coming and actually facing it were 2 completely different things. But then something unexpected happened. A new car pulled into my driveway, an old blue pickup truck that I recognized immediately. Tom Martinez climbed out, my neighbor from the property adjoining ours to the south. Tom was 72 years old, a retired sheriff's deputy who had lived in these parts his entire life. More importantly, Tom had been Robert's fishing buddy and one of the few people my husband had trusted completely. Tom knocked on my door, his weathered face creased with concern. "Patricia, I saw all these cars over here. Everything all right?" Before I could answer, Baxter stepped between us. "Sir, this is a private family matter. Mrs. Williams is receiving professional assistance." Tom's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. The men in suits, the official badges, my obvious distress. As a former law enforcement officer, he could probably smell something wrong from a mile away. "Patricia," Tom said, ignoring Baxter completely, "Robert asked me to keep an eye on you if anything ever happened to him. Said you might need a friend who understood how things work around here." Robert had prepared for this too.
He had enlisted Tom as backup, knowing I would need an ally who couldn't be bought or intimidated. "Mr. Dr. Webb asked. "Martinez. Tom Martinez. And you are?" As Tom forced the strangers to identify themselves and explain their presence, I realized this was my chance. While they were distracted, I slipped into the bathroom and pulled out the cell phone Robert had hidden in the medicine cabinet. Another surprise I had discovered while searching for evidence. It was an old flip phone, but it worked, and it had one number programmed into it: Emergency Legal Help. I dialed the number with shaking fingers. A woman's voice answered on the first ring. "Patricia Williams?" "Yes, how did you—" "Your husband hired me 6 months ago to be ready for this exact situation. My name is Jennifer Walsh, and I'm an attorney who specializes in elder abuse and family fraud. Are you in immediate danger?" "I think so. There are men here trying to have me declared incompetent. They want to take me for evaluation. Do not go with them under any circumstances. Do you have the evidence Robert collected?" "Yes." "Good. I'm 20 minutes away. Keep them talking until I get there. And Patricia? Your husband was a very smart man. He prepared for every possibility." When I came out of the bathroom, Tom was in full retired cop mode, asking pointed questions about credentials and legal authority. The men were getting visibly frustrated, their smooth operation derailed by an unexpected witness who knew how to challenge authority. "Mrs. Williams," Officer Craig tried to regain control, "we really do need to proceed with this evaluation, for your own safety." "Safety from what?" Tom asked sharply. "What exactly has Patricia done that makes her unsafe?" That's when Dr. Webb made a crucial mistake. "Mr. Martinez, Mrs. Williams has been exhibiting signs of paranoid delusion. She believes her own children are conspiring against her. She's been making wild accusations about business fraud and family betrayal. Clearly, the stress of widowhood has affected her judgment." Tom looked at me with raised eyebrows. "Patricia, is that true? Do you think Sarah and Michael are plotting against you?" I met his eyes and saw something there, a flicker of understanding, as if Robert had told him more than just to keep an eye on me. Tom knew something. "I think my husband left me some information," I said carefully, "that might explain why these men are so eager to have me declared incompetent." Tom nodded slowly. "Information about what?" "About oil rights, and about people who make money by stealing land from elderly widows." The silence in the room was deafening. Baxter's face had gone white, and his associates were exchanging worried glances. Dr. Webb stopped taking notes, and Officer Craig suddenly looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. That's when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world: car tires on gravel, and the slam of a car door that announced the arrival of someone who wasn't part of their conspiracy. Jennifer Walsh walked into my house like an avenging angel, armed with legal documents and a voice that could cut through steel. "Gentlemen, I'm Mrs. Williams' attorney. Unless you have a court order signed by a judge, you need to leave this property immediately." But as my unexpected salvation unfolded, I realized that Robert's preparation had been even more thorough than I had imagined, and that the fight for my freedom was just beginning. Jennifer Walsh was nothing like I had expected. She was maybe 40 years old, dressed in a simple business suit, but she carried herself with the kind of quiet authority that made even Baxter's intimidation squad take a step back. She opened her briefcase with deliberate calm and pulled out a thick folder. "Dr. Webb," she said, looking directly at the psychiatrist, "I have some questions about your licensing. According to the Montana Board of Medical Examiners, your authorization to practice was suspended 3 months ago pending an investigation into fraudulent competency evaluations. Would you care to explain why you're attempting to conduct psychiatric assessments without a valid license?" Dr. Webb's face went ashen. There must be some mistake." "Officer Craig," Jennifer continued without missing a beat, "Adult Protective Services has no record of any complaint filed against Mrs. Williams. In fact, according to my contact at APS, you were terminated from the agency 6 weeks ago for accepting bribes to file false reports. So I'm curious about what authority you think you have here." The fake officer was backing toward the door, his confident demeanor crumbling. "There's been a misunderstanding." "Oh, there's been a misunderstanding, all right." Jennifer's voice got harder. "But it's yours. You gentlemen have just attempted to commit several felonies, including elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft, in front of witnesses. Tom Martinez was grinning like he'd just watched his favorite football team score a touchdown. Patricia, your husband sure knew how to pick his allies. But Jennifer wasn't finished. She turned to Baxter with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Mr. James Baxter, CEO of Baxter Industries, or should I say, former CEO, because according to the FBI investigation that's been ongoing for 18 months, your company is about to be shut down for systematic elder abuse across 7 states. Baxter tried to bluster. You can't prove anything. We're legitimate businessmen helping families navigate complex fraud schemes, Jennifer interrupted. She pulled out a recording device. Mr. Baxter, I have 17 hours of recorded conversations between you and your associates discussing how to manipulate elderly landowners into selling mineral rights for a fraction of their value. I have email evidence of you bribing corrupt officials to fast-track incompetency evaluations. And I have financial records showing that your company has stolen approximately $43 million from elderly victims over the past 3 years. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Dr. Webb and Officer Craig fleeing through my front door. Baxter stood frozen, apparently calculating whether he should run or try to salvage the situation. But here's what you don't know, Mr. Baxter, Jennifer continued. Robert Williams wasn't just documenting your crimes against his family. He was working as an undercover informant for the FBI. Every meeting, every phone call, every email between you and his children was recorded and documented. You didn't just walk into a trap. You walked into a federal investigation. The blood drained from Baxter's face. That's impossible. Robert Williams was just a sick old farmer. Robert Williams was a retired military intelligence officer who spent 30 years learning how to gather evidence and build cases against criminals. Jennifer's smile got wider. Did you really think a man smart enough to accumulate millions in secret investments would be fooled by your pathetic little scam? Military intelligence officer? In 40 years of marriage, Robert had told me he was a supply clerk in the Army. Another lie, but this one designed to protect rather than deceive. Jennifer pulled out another folder. Mrs. Williams, your husband left detailed instructions for this moment. He knew that once Baxter's people fled, we would need to deal with the family situation. Sarah and Michael are hiding in the Billings Hotel right now, waiting for Baxter to call with news that you've been successfully committed. But what they don't know is that their own communications have been monitored for months. She handed me a transcript of text messages between my children that made my heart break all over again. Messages discussing how to speed up Mom's breakdown and whether they should increase the emotional pressure to make me crack faster. Messages planning to sell not just the mineral rights, but the entire farm, including the house where they had grown up, where their father had died, where I had planned to live out my remaining years. But the worst revelation was yet to come. Jennifer opened another folder. This one marked medical evidence, confidential. Patricia, Robert suspected for weeks that his medication was being tampered with, so he started having his blood tested at a private lab in Denver, sending the samples through Tom Martinez to avoid suspicion. The results confirmed his fears. She handed me a toxicology report that might as well have been written in a foreign language, but Jennifer translated the medical jargon into words that shattered what was left of my world. Someone was systematically poisoning your husband with compounds that would accelerate his cancer and make his death appear natural. The same compounds were found in Sarah's home during a search warrant execution this morning. She had been researching undetectable poisons for 3 months. Sarah, my daughter, the baby I had carried for 9 months, the little girl who used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms, the woman I had been so proud to see become a successful lawyer. She had been slowly murdering her own father. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Tom Martinez spoke up, his voice gentle. Patricia, Robert figured it out toward the end. They knew about the oil survey, but they didn't know about his investments or his FBI work. They thought if they could just get him declared incompetent or speed up his death, they could take control before he spent all the money on medical treatments or gave it away to charity. They killed him for money they thought he might spend, Jennifer added. They had no idea he was already dying naturally, and they had no idea he had prepared for every possible scenario, including his own murder. The room spun around me. I sank into Robert's chair, The same chair where he had sat reading his morning paper for 37 years, where he had probably planned this entire counterattack against our own children. "There's more," Jennifer said gently. The FBI raid on Sarah's house this morning also uncovered evidence of the wider conspiracy. She and Michael weren't just working with Baxter Industries. They were recruiting other families, getting paid commissions for every elderly parent they convinced to sign over property rights. They've been doing this for 2 years, Patricia. You're not their first victims. I thought about the phone calls Sarah had been making, the legal consulting work she claimed was keeping her so busy. She hadn't been building a law practice. She had been building a criminal enterprise that targeted the elderly. And Michael's real estate investments hadn't been legitimate business. They had been money laundering the profits from stealing from seniors. "How many families?" I asked. 43 families across Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota. Total estimated theft, $43 million. Your children were some of Baxter's most successful recruiters. My own children. The people I had sacrificed everything to raise, educate, and launch into successful lives. They had been monsters, and I had been too blind to see it. What happens now? Jennifer's expression softened. Now we finish what Robert started. Sarah and Michael were arrested this morning on charges of elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and first-degree murder. Baxter Industries is being shut down by federal authorities. And you, Patricia, are about to become one of the wealthiest women in Montana. She handed me one final folder, this one labeled The Complete Truth. Your husband wasn't just building a case against Baxter Industries, Patricia. He was building you a new life. The oil rights alone are worth approximately $8 million. His investment portfolio is currently valued at $2.7 million. The life insurance policy he took out 3 years ago is worth another $1 million. And there's something else. Something he saved as a surprise for after all this was over. I opened the folder with trembling hands, and what I found inside was so unexpected, so perfectly Robert, that I started laughing and crying at the same time. Deed records for a small house in Tuscany, Italy, plane tickets in my name for a flight leaving next month, and a letter in Robert's handwriting that began, "My dearest Patty, if you're reading this, then the nightmare is over, and you're free to start the adventure we always talked about, but never had the money to take." But even as I marveled at my husband's final gift, Jennifer's expression told me that the nightmare wasn't quite over yet. There was something else, something she hadn't told me, something that would make this entire ordeal even more devastating than I could have imagined. Jennifer's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. There was still something worse coming. After learning that my children had murdered their father and spent years stealing from elderly families, I couldn't imagine what could be more devastating. But I was about to find out. "Patricia," Jennifer said carefully, "there's one more thing Robert discovered in his investigation. Something about why Sarah and Michael targeted your family specifically." She pulled out a final folder, this one thicker than the others, and marked "Family History, Classified." My hands shook as I opened it, revealing documents that went back decades, birth certificates, adoption papers, medical records, and DNA tests. "Sarah and Michael aren't your biological children." The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Robert hired a private investigator to dig into Baxter Industries' methods. What he found was that the company doesn't just randomly target elderly landowners. They research families, looking for specific vulnerabilities. In your case, they discovered that Sarah and Michael were adopted through a private agency that was later shut down for trafficking children from broken families. I stared at the DNA test results, the numbers swimming before my eyes. 0% genetic match. The children I had raised, loved, sacrificed everything for, weren't even my children. But that's not the worst part, Jennifer continued. The adoption agency was a front operation run by James Baxter's father. Sarah and Michael weren't placed with your family randomly. They were planted, specifically chosen, and placed with families that the agency believed would eventually acquire valuable property. Planted? I could barely form the words. Tom Martinez spoke up, his voice filled with disgust. "Patricia, they were raised from childhood to be thieves, trained to identify and exploit elderly targets. Your family wasn't their first assignment. According to FBI records, they've been doing this since they turned 18. The room was spinning. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, my 40 years of motherhood
had been a lie. The babies I had nursed through fevers, the toddlers I had taught to walk, the teenagers I had driven to school every morning, they had never been my children at all. They had been infiltrators, placed in my home to steal from me when the time was right. How long have they known? I whispered. Jennifer consulted her notes. According to intercepted communications, they've known about their true origins since they were 16. Baxter Industries has been planning this specific operation for over 20 years. 20 years. While I was worrying about their college tuition and celebrating their graduations and proudly watching them build their careers, they were planning to destroy me. Every family dinner, every birthday party, every "I love you, Mom" had been a performance designed to keep me vulnerable and trusting. The FBI found detailed psychological profiles in Sarah's files, Jennifer continued. Profiles of you and Robert, analyzing your weaknesses, planning how to manipulate your emotions, calculating the best timing for the final betrayal. I thought about Sarah's tears yesterday, her performance of grief and concern. Even that had been scripted, practiced, perfected over decades of deceiving other families. There's more, Jennifer said, though I couldn't imagine how there could be. The private investigator also uncovered what happened to your real children. My real children. The words didn't make sense at first. I had been so young when I adopted Sarah and Michael, just 22 years old. Robert and I had been trying to have children for 3 years, going through painful fertility treatments that never worked. When the adoption agency contacted us about 2 siblings who needed a home, it felt like a miracle. But now Jennifer was telling me that somewhere out there, I had biological children I had never known existed. Patricia, you were drugged during a routine medical procedure when you were 21. Your eggs were harvested without your knowledge and used for illegal fertility treatments. You have biological children, twins, who were sold to a wealthy family in California. The folder contained photographs of 2 people who looked exactly like me at their age. A man and woman, both 37 years old, both with my eyes and Robert's stubborn chin. David and Diana Peterson, living in San Francisco, both successful professionals who had no idea their birth mother was a farmer's wife in Montana. They've been looking for you, Jennifer said softly. They hired their own investigators years ago, but the records were buried so deep they couldn't find the trail. When Robert's FBI contact ran DNA through the national database, your biological children were flagged as a match. I was holding photographs of strangers who were my real children, while processing the fact that the people I had called my children for nearly 4 decades were criminals who had been planning to destroy me since they were teenagers. In that moment, alone, I knew there was no turning back, but I found myself thinking, if you were in my shoes, would you have the courage to face it, or would you stay silent to survive? Write in the comments. I really want to know. The sound of my phone ringing cut through the silence. Jennifer looked at the caller ID and frowned. It's the Billings Police Department. Sarah and Michael must have posted bail. She answered the phone, listened for a moment, then her face went pale. Patricia, we have a problem. Sarah and Michael weren't in jail. The arrest warrants weren't executed because they fled. They're in the wind, and according to intelligence reports, they're not running alone. Tom stood up sharply. What do you mean, not alone? Baxter Industries has connections to organized crime. When their major operations get compromised, they don't just disappear. They eliminate witnesses. Sarah and Michael know that Patricia can identify dozens of their victims. As long as she's alive, she's a threat to the entire network. The phone rang again. This time, Jennifer put it on speaker. A voice I recognized as Sarah's, but cold and mechanical in a way I had never heard before. Hello, Mother. The word dripped with sarcasm. I hear you've been having conversations with lawyers and FBI agents. That's very disappointing. Sarah, where are you? Close enough. You know, it's funny. We spent so many years pretending to care about you, pretending to be grateful for your pathetic attempts at motherhood. Do you have any idea how exhausting it was to act like we loved you? The cruelty in her voice was like a knife to my heart. But underneath the pain, something else was growing. Anger. Pure, clean anger that felt like fire in my veins. You killed your father, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Sarah laughed. Robert wasn't our father, you stupid woman. He was a target, A very profitable target, as it turned out. Though not as profitable as we hoped. Apparently the old fool was smarter than we gave him credit for. "Where are you calling from?" "Oh, we're around. Watching. Waiting for the right moment to finish what we started." "You see, Mother, you know too much now. About us, about our business, about all those other families we helped liberate from their useless sentimentality about property and inheritance." Jennifer was frantically typing on her laptop, presumably trying to trace the call. Tom had moved to the window and was scanning the horizon for any sign of vehicles. "The thing is," Sarah continued, "you're old, you're alone, and you're traumatized by grief. It would be so easy for you to have an accident. A fall down the stairs, a gas leak, a tragic house fire. Rural Montana is full of dangers for elderly widows living alone." The threat was clear. They were going to kill me, and they were going to make it look accidental. "But we're not unreasonable," Michael's voice joined the call. "You could make this easy on everyone. Sign over the property rights, transfer the investment accounts, and disappear. Go live in that little house in Italy that dear old Robert bought you. We'll let you have enough money to live comfortably for whatever time you have left." "And if I refuse?" Sarah's laugh was like ice. "Then you'll join Robert sooner than you expected. But unlike his death, yours won't be peaceful." The call ended, leaving us in silence that felt heavy with menace. Jennifer closed her laptop and looked at me with grim determination. "Patricia, you need to decide right now. We can put you in protective custody, relocate you, give you a new identity, or what? Or we finish what Robert started. We use you as bait to draw them out, record everything, and put them away forever. But if we do that, you'll be in real danger. They're not just con artists anymore. They're killers with nothing left to lose." I looked around my living room, at the home where I had lived for 4 decades, where I had believed I was building a family and a life. Everything had been a lie, but it had been my lie, my life, my choice to love and trust and hope. And now these monsters, these strangers who had stolen my real children's place in my heart, were threatening to take even that away from me. "I'm done running," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "I'm done being afraid. Set the trap." The plan Jennifer and Tom devised was simple but dangerous. I would return to my normal routine, pretending I didn't know Sarah and Michael were watching me while FBI agents positioned themselves around the property. When they made their move, we would have everything on record. Their threats, their confession, and hopefully their arrest. But I had my own plan, one I didn't share with my protectors. Robert had left me more than just evidence and money. In that barn, hidden behind the paintings and woodwork, I had found something else. A safe containing Robert's service weapon from his military days, along with documentation showing he had kept his firearms license current. My husband had been prepared for the possibility that this confrontation might not end peacefully. For 3 days, I went through the motions of normal life while knowing I was being hunted. I fed the chickens, tended my garden, sat on the porch in the evenings reading a book. All the while I could feel eyes watching me from the tree line, sense the presence of predators waiting for the right moment to strike. On the 4th night, they came. I was washing dishes when I heard the sound of breaking glass from the living room. No attempt at stealth now. They wanted me to know they were inside. I dried my hands calmly, picked up the canvas bag with Robert's evidence, and walked toward the sound. Sarah and Michael were standing in my living room, but they weren't the people I remembered. Sarah's lawyer facade had been stripped away, revealing something cold and predatory underneath. Michael had traded his real estate professional appearance for all black clothing and what looked like surgical gloves. They weren't here to talk. "Hello, Mother," Sarah said, the fake warmth completely gone from her voice. "Time for our final conversation." "I was wondering when you'd work up the courage to face me," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the terror racing through my veins. Michael moved to block the front door while Sarah approached me with something in her hand, a syringe. "We've decided to make this quick. A simple injection, a heart attack brought on by grief and stress. Very believable for a woman your age. The same way you killed Robert." Sarah smiled, and it was like looking at a shark. Robert was more complicated. The old fool was tougher than we expected. It took months of small doses to weaken him enough. But you, Mother dear, you're just a scared old woman. This will be much simpler.
That's when I realized they still didn't understand who they were dealing with. They had never known the real Robert, and they had never bothered to learn about the real me. They saw what they expected to see, a helpless victim waiting to be disposed of. Before you do that, I said, pulling the canvas bag closer, don't you want to know what Robert really left me? Michael laughed. We know what he left you. Oil rights and investments that should have been ours. Money that belongs to people smart enough to take it. Actually, he left me something else. The truth about who you really are. I pulled out the folder with their real background, watching their confidence falter as they realized how much I knew. Sarah's hand with the syringe wavered slightly. Robert wasn't just investigating Baxter Industries, I continued. He was investigating you. He found out about the adoption agency, about your real parents, about your training. He knew you weren't my children long before he died. Shut up, Michael snarled, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He also found David and Diana Peterson, my real children, the ones you replaced. I pulled out the photographs of my biological children. They're beautiful, aren't they? And they're nothing like you. Sarah's mask slipped completely, revealing the rage underneath. Those people mean nothing. You raised us. You chose us. We're more your children than they'll ever be. No, I said quietly. You're parasites. You attached yourselves to my family and fed off our love and trust for 40 years. But you were never my children. Children don't murder their parents. That's when Sarah lunged with the syringe. But I was ready. Robert's military training hadn't just been about gathering intelligence. It had been about combat. And apparently, some of those lessons had rubbed off during our 40 years of marriage. I sidestepped Sarah's attack and brought the heavy canvas bag up hard into her wrist. The syringe went flying across the room. Michael rushed me from behind, but I spun around with an energy I didn't know I possessed and caught him in the solar plexus with my elbow. He doubled over, gasping. You trained me well, Robert, I whispered to my husband's memory. But they recovered quickly, and now they were both furious. This wasn't going according to their plan, and desperate criminals make dangerous mistakes. Fine, Sarah snarled, pulling something else from her jacket. A knife. We'll make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Much more dramatic anyway. That's when the front door exploded inward and Tom Martinez burst in, followed by Jennifer Walsh and 3 FBI agents. But in the chaos of the entry, Sarah managed to grab me, pressing the knife to my throat. Everyone stop, she screamed. Stop or I'll cut her throat right here. The room froze. FBI agents had their weapons drawn, but they couldn't shoot without risking my life. Sarah was using me as a human shield, and she knew it. You can't win this, Jennifer said calmly. It's over, Sarah. Michael, you're surrounded, you're outnumbered, and everything you've said tonight has been recorded. Maybe, Sarah's voice was getting higher, more desperate, but I can still take her with me. This pathetic woman who thinks she's so much better than us, who thinks love and sacrifice and all that emotional garbage actually matters. She pressed the knife harder against my throat, and I felt a thin line of blood trickle down my neck. But in that moment, instead of fear, I felt something else entirely. Clarity, purpose, the absolute certainty of what I had to do. Sarah, I said quietly. Shut up. Look at me, Sarah. Something in my voice made her turn slightly, just enough to meet my eyes, and what she saw there made her expression change from triumph to confusion to something that might have been fear. I want you to know something before this ends, I said. Despite everything you've done, despite all the lies and the murder and the pain you've caused, there's still a part of me that remembers the little girl who had nightmares, who needed someone to read her bedtime stories, who cried when she scraped her knee. Sarah's grip on the knife wavered slightly. But that little girl is gone, isn't she? She was never real in the first place. You killed her along with everything else. Stop talking. I forgive you, Sarah. Not because you deserve it, but because Robert taught me that carrying hate only poisons the person carrying it. I forgive you for not being my real daughter. I forgive you for murdering my husband. I even forgive you for this. And then I did something that caught everyone in the room completely off guard, including myself. I reached into my bag and pulled out Robert's service weapon, the one I had been carrying all along, the one nobody knew about. In one smooth motion, I pressed it against Sarah's side and looked directly into her eyes. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm going to let you hurt anyone else. The standoff lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like hours. Sarah staring at me in shock, the knife still at my throat. Me with Robert's gun pressed against her ribs, finger on the trigger, absolutely certain I could pull it if I had to. Then Michael made the crucial mistake of trying to help his sister. He rushed toward us, and in that split second of distraction, Tom Martinez tackled him to the ground while Jennifer Walsh grabbed Sarah's wrist and twisted the knife away. Both of them were on the ground in handcuffs within minutes, screaming threats and curses that revealed the true depths of their hatred. Not just for me, but for everyone they had ever targeted, every family they had destroyed, every elderly person whose trust they had betrayed. As the FBI agents led them away, Sarah turned back to me one last time. "You think you've won? You think this is over? We're not the only ones, you stupid woman. There are others, dozens of others. This network is bigger than you can imagine, and they all know about you now." The threats continued until they were stuffed into the police cars, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was looking at Robert's gun in my hands, amazed that I had been capable of using it, grateful that I hadn't needed to. Jennifer approached me carefully. "Patricia, are you okay?" I looked around my living room, at the broken glass and overturned furniture, at the evidence of violence that would forever change how I saw this space. "I will be," I said. And for the first time since Robert's death, I believed it. But Sarah's parting words echoed in my mind. This network is bigger than you can imagine, which meant that even with Sarah and Michael in custody, my fight for freedom might just be beginning. The weeks that followed the arrest felt like living in someone else's life. FBI agents came and went from my farm, setting up surveillance equipment and conducting interviews that lasted for hours. Jennifer Walsh practically moved into my guest room, coordinating with federal prosecutors who were building what they called the largest elder abuse case in Montana history. But the most surreal part was the phone call that came 3 days after Sarah and Michael were locked up in federal detention. "Mrs. Williams, this is David Peterson. I think you might be my mother, my real son, my biological child, calling me after 37 years of separation." His voice was deeper than Michael's had been, but there was something in the cadence, the careful way he chose his words, that reminded me of Robert. "David," I whispered, the name feeling strange and wonderful on my tongue. "My sister Diana and I have been following the news coverage. When we saw your picture, when we heard your story, we knew. Even before the DNA confirmation came through, we knew." We talked for 2 hours that first call. David was a software engineer, married to a teacher named Lisa, with 2 children I had never met. Diana was a veterinarian, single by choice, living in San Francisco and running a clinic for rescue animals. They were good people, accomplished people, people who had built meaningful lives despite being stolen from their real family as babies. "We want to meet you," Diana said when she joined the call. "If you're ready, if you want to meet us." "I've wanted to meet you for 37 years, I said through tears. "I just didn't know you existed." But even as I was discovering the joy of reconnecting with my real children, the investigation was revealing the true scope of what Sarah and Michael had been part of. Jennifer brought me updates that made my head spin with their complexity and cruelty. "Patricia, the FBI has identified over 200 victims across 12 states. Sarah and Michael weren't just foot soldiers in this operation. They were regional coordinators. They trained other adoptees, placed other infiltrators with target families, managed a network of fake professionals like that psychiatrist and APS officer. Baxter Industries hadn't been just a mining company that occasionally defrauded elderly landowners. It had been the front for a multi-generational criminal enterprise that placed stolen children with families specifically chosen for future exploitation. The children were raised as sleeper agents, activated when their target families acquired valuable assets. "How many others?" I asked. "At least 50 active infiltrators that we know of. The FBI is conducting raids across the country, but some of them have disappeared, gone underground with new identities, waiting for the heat to die down before surfacing with new target families." The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Hundreds of elderly people robbed of their life savings. Dozens of families destroyed by children who were never really their children. And at the center of it all, a network of criminals who had weaponized the most basic human instinct, the desire to love and be loved by family. "What about Sarah and Michael?" I asked. "What will happen to them?" Jennifer's expression was grim. Federal charges for elder abuse, conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and first-degree murder. With the evidence Robert gathered and the confessions we recorded, they're looking at life in prison without parole. But Patricia, but what? They're trying to make a deal. Information about the network in exchange for reduced sentences. The FBI wants to take down the entire operation, not just your case. I thought about that for a long time. Part of me wanted Sarah and Michael to rot in prison for what they had done to Robert, to me, to all those other families. But another part of me, the part that Robert had nurtured over 40 years of marriage, understood that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about preventing future victims. What kind of deal? 25 to life instead of life without parole. They would testify against the network leaders, provide names and locations of other infiltrators, help the FBI dismantle the entire operation. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to balance the scales for Robert's murder or the decades of deception. But it might save other families from going through what I had experienced. "Do it," I said. "But I have conditions." Jennifer raised her eyebrows. "What conditions?" "I want to face them. Before they're sentenced, I want to give a victim impact statement. I want them to hear what they did to me, to Robert, to everyone they hurt, and I want it on the record." The victim impact hearing was held 6 weeks later in a federal courthouse in Billings. Sarah and Michael sat at the defendant's table in orange prison jumpsuits, their lawyer facade stripped away, looking smaller and more ordinary than they had ever seemed when I thought they were my children. When my turn came to speak, I walked to the podium with a folder containing the photos Robert had painted of me, of our life together, of the family he thought we had built. "Your Honors," I began, "these people stole 40 years of my life. They murdered my husband. They destroyed my faith in family, in love, in the basic goodness of human beings." I looked directly at Sarah and Michael as I spoke, forcing them to meet my eyes, but they failed to steal the most important thing. They failed to steal who I am. They failed to break my spirit, and they failed to prevent me from finding my real children, the ones they were placed to replace. I pulled out a photo of David and Diana, taken during their first visit to the farm 3 weeks earlier. "These are my real children, and they're nothing like you. They're kind, honest, loving people who would never dream of hurting someone for money. They're everything you pretended to be, but real." Sarah was staring at the table, but I could see tears on her cheeks. For a moment, I wondered if there was some tiny piece of the little girl I had raised still buried inside the criminal she had become. "I forgive you," I said, and her head snapped up in surprise. "Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because carrying hate would poison what's left of my life. I choose to spend my remaining years building something beautiful with my real family instead of being destroyed by your ugliness." The judge sentenced them to 25 years to life, with the possibility of parole after serving the full 25 years. They would be elderly themselves if they ever got out, assuming they survived that long in federal prison. As the bailiff led them away, Sarah turned back to look at me one last time. Her mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear over the courtroom noise. But I could read her lips. "I'm sorry. Too little. Too late. But maybe it was something." Jennifer found me in the courthouse parking lot afterward, sitting in Tom Martinez's truck and staring at the building where my nightmare had finally ended. "It's over," she said. "Is it? What about the network? The other infiltrators? The FBI has arrested 37 suspects in the past month. Sarah and Michael's information has been invaluable. It'll take years to track down everyone, but the operation is crippled. No more children will be placed with target families." I nodded, feeling a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying finally lift from my shoulders. "What will you do now?" Jennifer asked. I looked at the folder in my lap, containing plane tickets to Italy that were scheduled for next week. David and Diana were planning to meet me in Tuscany, along with their families, my grandchildren, who were excited to meet their American grandmother they had never known existed. "I'm going to learn how to be happy," I said. Robert always said life was too short to waste on anger and fear. I think it's time I found out what he meant. But as Tom drove me home to pack for my journey to the new life Robert had prepared for me, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, other elderly people were being watched, targeted, betrayed by the people they loved most. The network might be damaged, but evil like that doesn't just disappear. Still, for the first time in months, I felt something I had almost forgotten: hope. 6 months later, I was sitting on the terrace of my small house in Tuscany, watching the sunrise paint the rolling hills gold while my granddaughter Emma picked wildflowers in the garden below. At 8 years old, she had Robert's stubborn chin and my eyes, and when she laughed, it was like hearing music I had been waiting my whole life to discover. David and Diana had extended their visit twice, neither of them quite ready to return to their normal lives when we were still learning how to be a family. Lisa, David's wife, had fallen in love with the Italian countryside and was already talking about relocating her teaching career to the international school in Florence. Diana had found a local veterinarian who needed help with the farm animals in the surrounding villages, and she was spending her days delivering baby goats and treating horses with injuries that reminded her why she became a vet in the first place. "Nonna Patricia," Emma called up to me in her mixture of English and the Italian she was absorbing with the frightening speed of childhood. "Come see what I found." Nonna, grandmother. A word I had never thought I would hear directed at me, spoken by a child who carried my genes instead of my gullibility. I made my way down to the garden, where Emma was crouched beside a patch of herbs Robert had somehow arranged to have planted before I arrived. Rosemary and basil, thyme and oregano, all the things I had grown in my Montana garden, transplanted to this foreign soil like I had been. "Look," Emma whispered, pointing to a small bird's nest hidden among the rosemary branches. "Baby birds, they're so tiny." I knelt beside her, this granddaughter I was still learning to know, and watched 3 tiny chicks open their beaks toward their mother. New life, starting fresh, completely dependent on the love and protection of someone who would sacrifice everything for their well-being. "Will they be okay?" Emma asked. "They will," I said, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. "Their mama will take good care of them." My phone rang. The international cell phone Jennifer had insisted I carry to stay in touch with the ongoing legal proceedings. The caller ID showed a Montana number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Williams, this is Special Agent Jennifer Morrison with the FBI. I worked with Jennifer Walsh on your case." My heart clenched. "Is everything all right? Has something happened?" "Actually, I'm calling with good news. We wanted to let you know that the last of the infiltrators from the Baxter Network was arrested yesterday in Oregon. A 62-year-old woman who had been placed with a farming family 38 years ago, just like your situation. She was about to inherit mineral rights worth $12 million. Relief flooded through me. "Is the family safe?" "They're safe. Your testimony and the evidence you provided helped us recognize the pattern and intervene before any harm was done. Mrs. Williams, I want you to know that your courage in facing this situation has directly prevented dozens of other families from experiencing what you went through." After I hung up, I sat in the Italian sunshine thinking about that unknown family in Oregon, about the elderly couple who would never know how close they had come to losing everything to someone they thought they loved. They would continue living their quiet lives, trusting their adopted daughter, never knowing that their world had almost been shattered. There was comfort in that anonymity, in evil prevented rather than justice served after the fact. Emma had wandered back to her flower picking, and I could hear David and Diana in the kitchen preparing lunch, their voices mixing with Lisa's laughter as she struggled with the Italian cookbook she was determined to master. The sounds of family, real family, complicated and imperfect and beautiful in ways I was still learning to appreciate. But there were shadows in this new happiness, scars that would never completely heal. Some nights I still woke up reaching for Robert, forgetting for those first cruel seconds of consciousness that he was gone. Some days I caught myself listening for the sound of children coming home from school, before remembering that the children I had raised were in federal prison and the children I had given birth to were adults with their own families. The grief was different now, more complicated. I mourned Robert's death, but I also mourned the life we had lived together, a life built on a foundation of lies I had been too trusting to see. I mourned the children I had loved who had never existed, and I felt guilty for mourning people who had been planning to murder me. Jennifer Walsh visited me once, flying to Italy to check on my adjustment and to bring news about the ongoing prosecutions. We sat in this same garden, drinking wine and watching the sunset paint the hills purple. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, "choosing to fight instead of just disappearing?" I thought about that question for a long time. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that Robert died before he could enjoy this place, before he could meet David and Diana. I regret that there are probably other families out there still being victimized by networks we haven't discovered yet. But fighting back? No, I don't regret that. Robert taught me that evil thrives when good people choose to look away. If I had just taken the money and run, Sarah and Michael would still be out there, still destroying families. The network would still be operating. Jennifer nodded. The FBI estimates that your case led to the prevention of approximately 200 future crimes. Families who will never know they were saved, but families who get to keep living their real lives because you refuse to be a victim. 200 families. The number was too large to really comprehend, but it gave weight to the choice I had made to stand and fight instead of running to safety. Emma came back to show me her bouquet of wildflowers, and as I helped her arrange them in a mason jar I had brought from Montana, I thought about the strange circularity of life. This child, picking flowers in an Italian garden, was doing something her grandfather would have loved to see. Robert's sacrifice had made this moment possible, even though he would never witness it himself. The afternoon post brought another surprise, a letter with a Montana postmark, addressed in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a note from Tom Martinez and a small wooden box. "Patricia," the note read, "I was cleaning out Robert's workbench in the barn and found this hidden under some old paint cans. Figured you should have it. Hope Italy is treating you well. Your Montana family misses you, but we're glad you found your happiness. Tom." Inside the wooden box was a ring I had never seen before, a simple gold band with an inscription on the inside. "For my real wife, when she's ready for our real adventure. All my love, Robert." A wedding ring. For a marriage that would have been based on truth instead of the lies we had unknowingly built our life around. Robert had been planning to tell me everything, to start over with honesty, to give us the chance to choose each other with full knowledge of who we really were. I slipped the ring onto my finger, next to the wedding band I still wore from our first marriage. Past and future, lies and truth, grief and hope, all of it part of the complicated woman I had become. David found me crying over the ring and the note, and without asking for explanation, he simply sat beside me and held my hand until the tears stopped. That's what real children do. They comfort without demanding explanations. They love without conditions. They choose to stay when staying is difficult. As evening fell over the Tuscan hills, I made dinner for my real family in the kitchen of the house my dead husband had somehow known I would need. David told stories about his work. Diana shared funny tales about her veterinary patients. Lisa planned our next day trip to a nearby village, and Emma drew pictures of the baby birds we had discovered together. It was ordinary and extraordinary, this life I had never expected to have. It was healing and heartbreaking, peaceful and tinged with sadness for all that had been lost along the way. But it was real. Finally, after 40 years of unknowingly living a lie, everything around me was absolutely, completely real. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood on my terrace looking at the stars over Italy and thinking about the woman I had been 6 months ago, the frightened widow who had found a key and opened a door to truths she never wanted to learn. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger and sadder and more grateful for simple, honest love. Someone who understood the difference between family by choice and family by blood, between love earned and love performed. In the distance, I could hear church bells ringing midnight in the village below, marking the end of another day in my real life. Tomorrow, Emma and I would check on the baby birds. David would try to fix the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom. Diana would visit the injured horse at the farm down the hill. Lisa would attempt another Italian recipe. Real life. Imperfect, complicated, honest, real life. I touched Robert's new ring on my finger and whispered to the Italian night, "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for giving me the tools to save myself. Thank you for this second chance at happiness." The stars didn't answer, but somewhere in the darkness, I heard the sound of an owl calling to its mate, and the response that came back across the hills sounded almost like, "You're welcome." As I turned to go inside, a small white envelope slipped out from under my door, something that hadn't been there when I came out to the terrace. My heart stopped for a moment, old fears rising like ghosts, but when I opened it, I found only a single line written in Italian, translated into English underneath. "Welcome home, brave lady. The village is proud to have you here." Even in this foreign place, I was building new connections, new reasons to trust, new evidence that most people were good and kind when given the chance to be. I looked back once more at the hills where I was learning to be happy, then went inside to the house where my real family was sleeping safely, and closed the door on everything that had come before. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Leave your like and share it with someone special who needs to hear what I lived through. This is a space of love and respect, and every day there's a different story of strong, courageous women who never gave up.